Hello, guys. This is the Perpetuating Party of Patriots, and it's been a bit since I've done a top list or, basically a list video. But today we're going to be doing a top six. Yeah, not a top five nor a top 10, a top six video. And also, happy first day of May, by the way. And as you read by the title and as you see on the thumbnail, I'm going to be counting down my top six Street Fighter games. Now, as you guys, Street Fighter isn't exactly a stranger to my channel. Personally, I really love Street Fighter. It's one of my favorite fighting game franchises, alongside King of Fighters and Super Smash Brothers, for example. But yeah, it's not like the most overly complex fighting game franchise, but it's a very accessible one, and a lot of the games in this franchise are very fun to play, in my opinion. And yeah, naturally, as I've given my opinion on Street Fighter, I'm going to be counting down what are my top six favorites. Now, this was kind of originally going to be a top 10, but Street Fighter has a lot of variations of their games, so I figured I'd just count down the top six that I really liked. And uh, yeah, there are a couple rules regarding this list. No games in the Versus series. You guys want to mean by the Versus series? Basically, games like Capcom versus SNK, Marvel versus Capcom. This is just going to be strictly a Street Fighter list, but I will be counting Street Fighter Cross Tekken for this type of list, though, because it is a Street Fighter game, all things considered. And speaking of that, let's get on to our number six pick. Okay, so to start off this list at the number six spot, we have literally the game that I just mentioned, Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Now, this is going to be a bit of a hot take because from what I've seen, a lot of people really do not like this game. It does get trashed by quite a bit of people, but personally, I don't really get it. Personally, I actually really liked Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Now, basically to describe this game, it's pretty much take Street Fighter 4, but add teams and Tekken characters, and bam, you got Street Fighter 4. Now, yeah, there was kind of one aspect that I just thought was kind of there, to be honest, and that was I think it's called the gem system. Uh, it's kind of hard to describe and how it works, but yeah, I think it basically helps you like with your charge meter, super meter, whatever. But yeah, I thought this game was personally a pretty fun time. The controls were pretty smooth. The mechanics again had that Street Fighter 4 feel of not being overly complex, but not being overly simple too. So it's kind of like a blend of those two. A pretty nice one. And usually Street Fighter games aren't really that heavy on story, but it wasn't. It was at least a little interesting with like the Pandora's box thing and having different like Street Fighter characters and Tekken characters teaming up to find this Pandora's box. But yeah, and also I like the music in this game. That's one thing I'll praise pretty much every Street Fighter game for is they got some nice ass music, and I really like the rival themes. And well, they are remixes of the Volcanic Rim song, but I love Volcanic Rim, so it'd be hard to fuck that song up. But yeah, Street Fighter Cross Tekken, not a whole lot to say about it because well, there's not a whole lot to talk about. Just know that I think it's a pretty fun game and it's a bit underrated too. Anyway, let's move on to the next game. And coming in at the number 5 spot, we have Street Fighter Alpha 2. Now, the Alpha series has got to be probably among some of my favorite games in the Street Fighter series. They're prequels to Street Fighter. Well, I think all three of them are pretty much prequels to the Street Fighter 2 game, and I think they're very fun, and they're better Street Fighter 1s than the actual Street Fighter 1, or at least the first Alpha. But the first Alpha, it was a fun game, but I feel like there was a bit more they could do with it. And I think they utilized that in Street Fighter Alpha 2, as it is on this list. Now, uh, I do think its sequel is better. Yeah, kind of foreshadowing that the next one's going to be on this list. But Alpha 2 was really where I feel like they started to give a really huge shit about the Alpha series. Because, yeah, Alpha 2 is fucking great. Now, to explain why I like it so much, it is surprisingly actually kind of technical, admittedly. And basically, to explain some of the more technical aspects. this game actually does have a kind of a counter breaker or a combo breaker type thing with the alpha counters. It's pretty much in the name. Like you could use like a move to counter the enemy when they're, I think, comboing you. But yeah, I think these add a pretty nice layer of depth to the game. And another thing this game introduced was the custom combos. If you're asking what custom combos are, well, again, it's pretty much in the name. Like, and with the custom combos, you can do some surprisingly pretty crazy shit with it. Yeah, I've seen videos of people playing Alpha 2 on the internet, and I've seen some pretty crazy shit going on with these, particularly with characters like Akuma and, well, pretty much the Hadoken characters. But, yeah, and I also, again, there's the music, which I think is very nice. I do think Alpha 2 does have some better music tracks than Alpha 3, but yeah, I particularly like the more characterized and like remix versions of the Street Fighter 2 things pretty much. And yeah, I also like the Alpha series of characters where not only do they bring new characters into the mix, but they also actually bring back characters from the original Street Fighter. And yeah, I'm just gonna be honest, I really do not like the first Street Fighter game, but these characters are welcome in the Alpha series, and they've also bringing in some Final Fight characters, which I also like Final Fight. So again, these are a nice addition as well. But yeah, I think I've talked a decent amount about Alpha 2. I think it's a very great game. Anyway, let's move on to the number 4 pick. And coming in at the number 4 pick, we have the best version of Street Fighter 2. Fight me on this. Hyper Street Fighter 2, the Anniversary Edition. Now, I've talked about this variation of Street Fighter 2 in my top 20 fighting games list, which I may at some point have to redo that list because there's a lot of placements I don't agree with. But yeah, I really, really love this version of Street Fighter 2, and interestingly, I didn't actually get to play it until last year, pretty much, which sucks because, fight me on this, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo fans. I think this is the greatest version of Hyper Street Fighter 2 well, I'll explain why. Now, it does obviously have the Street Fighter 2 gameplay, which I personally really like. The Street Fighter 2 gameplay. It is a bit simple. It's a bit simple, but there is a nice layer of depth to Street Fighter 2. And despite this game turning 30 this year, it still plays very, very well. Well, I'm talking about Street Fighter 2 in general, not Hyper. This came out in 2004, but yeah, Street Fighter 2 plays very well, and then in Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which is the second best version of Street Fighter 2, they introduced the super meters, which I think is pretty easy done, which I think is pretty easy to tell about because, well, I mean, they're basically like dedicated super attacks, but yeah, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo is very good. Now, take the stuff that Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo had, but add even more to it. By that, I mean and this is why I think this is the best version of Street Fighter 2, Hyper Street Fighter 2 lets you choose literally every single version of every character in Street Fighter 2. Well, with the exceptions of the World Warrior versions of the boss characters, but they weren't playable in that to begin with. I mean, it would have been cool, but yeah, some of them would have been fucking broken. But yeah, there is a lot of fucking matchups you could have with this. Like, for example, Champion Edition of Balrog versus like Super Turbo version of Ken, for example. And again, it's just a lot more stuff to mess around with. And again, some of these variations I actually prefer, like particularly the Turbo version, the Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting version of Ken. I personally prefer using him over some of the Super Turbo versions. But yeah, another thing this version has over Turbo is, well, you can actually change the music in this one. Yeah, they do have it. Hyper does have its own soundtrack, but it'll also let you choose between the CPS 1 sound chip music and the CPS 2 sound chip music. Personally, I always have the CPS 1 sound chip on because, I don't know, CPS 2 does sound a bit clearer, but I think the tracks in CPS 1 are a bit more catchy, in my opinion. And I think Ken and Guile have better CPS 2 themes, but I think overall the CPS 1 versions are better. But yeah, I think I've talked long enough about Hyper Street Fighter 2, but It's just a great game. Street Fighter 2 in general is also just a great game, but Hyper Street Fighter 2 is the best version. Anyways, let's move on to my number 3 pick. And coming in at my number 3 pick now, I don't know if this is necessarily going to be a controversial pick, well, in terms of the game itself, but I think some people might be a little bit angry that I put this over Street Fighter 2, but we have pretty much just the line of Street Fighter 4 games, just in general. So, Street Fighter 4 was pretty much Capcom's response to, well, the fighting game genre was kind of dying out a little bit towards the end of the 2000s decade. Not that they were necessarily putting out constantly bad games, just a couple games in the 2000s, a couple fighting games in the 2000s were really good, but yeah, it seemed like it was kind of dying out. But then Capcom dropped this beautiful little game called Street Fighter 4 and pretty much revived it. Street Fighter 4 was closer in gameplay terms to Street Fighter 2 than it was to Street Fighter 3. And yeah, believe it or not, Street Fighter 3 actually back then was actually a pretty negative critical reception, which later on the list you'll tell where I stand on that. But yeah, it was a fun game. Then they released Super Street Fighter 4, which is basically just Street Fighter 4, but with even more characters and all the ones they had to unlock in the original version already unlocked for you. And in my opinion, amazing main menu and character split themes, in my opinion. I love these threats. Well, a couple of them are Volcanic Rim remixes, but again, they sound really fucking good. Then they made Arcade Edition, which pretty much just introduced Yun Yang, Evil Ryu, and Oni, which, I like all four of these characters. But then they released Ultra Street Fighter 4, which is just pretty much everything. It has everything, although some worse music. But anyways, now time I actually talk about Street Fighter 4 gameplay-wise, instead of just giving you a basic history rundown. But yeah, to sum it up, I love the gameplay in Street Fighter 4. It's, I think I said this in the Street Fighter Cross Tekken segment, but it's pretty much a pretty perfect blend of not overly complicated to where some newcomers will just be completely lost, but it's not overly simple either. So it does have depth as well. And again, like it's a little bit harder to explain, but again, I just love the feel that the Street Fighter 4 series of games have. It's in that blend. And another thing that this is the one thing that I'm kind of hit or miss on, the new characters that they brought in. And I'm talking about like just the new characters in general, not characters that they brought back, but again, they're kind of hit or miss. I thought Rufus was pretty funny, admittedly. He's basically a fat dude that made an entire fighting style just based off of watching cheesy kung fu movies. I think that's pretty funny, personally. Abel, I just thought was kind of there. Crimson Viper, I do think is pretty hot, admittedly. Yuri, same thing. Hakan, I think he's kind of a pretty badass Turkish wrestler dude. And again, there's other ones, but again, I like the newly added characters in Street Fighter 3 more, but again, there's some cool things here. And now it's time to decide what my favorite version is. Okay, call me crazy, but I'm gonna have to say my favorite version is Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition. Now, I do have my reasons for it, and I know it's kind of shocking that I didn't put Ultra Street Fighter 4, but while Ultra Street Fighter 4 is technically the best in terms of its gameplay and just content, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really play much of the new characters that they brought in the Ultra Street Fighter 4. They pretty much just added content for Street Fighter Cross Tekken, but Super Street Fighter 4 had new characters that I actually played as, or liked playing as more so, and in my opinion, it just has the better main menu and character selection music. I'm not the biggest fan of the ones in Ultra, so yeah. While Arcade Edition is my favorite, I would suggest getting Ultra if you want the best gameplay experience. But really, any of the Street Fighter 4 games are pretty good, or really good. Anyway, now on to the runner-up on my list. And my second favorite Street Fighter game is Third Strike Street Fighter 3. Okay, earlier when I said that I'm thinking about redoing my top 20 fighting games list because there was a lot of spots I didn't agree with. this is one of the main ones that I disagreed with. Yeah, I think I put Third Strike way too fucking low on that list. I think it was at like number 18. But yeah, as you can tell, it's now my second favorite Street Fighter game, and yeah, Third Strike is fucking amazing in my opinion. Okay, well, let's talk about it. And there are a couple versions of Street Fighter 3, but in my opinion, none of them really compare to Third Strike. This game is gotta be one of the most complex fighting games, not just in Street Fighter history, but just in fighting game history too. Crap, I think it might even be the most technical one. If you're asking what I mean by well, I think it's kind of hard to just straight up define technical unless I pull out a dictionary, but there's a lot of complex mechanics in this game. One of the biggest ones, or perhaps the biggest one, is parrying. If you're asking what parrying is, basically, if you time your blocks right as you're being hit, you won't take any damage, and you'll, again, just end up parrying. Like with the alpha counters in Alpha 2 or the custom combos in Alpha 2, you can do some pretty crazy shit with the parries. There's actually a video out there of this guy named Justin Wong. He was just about to get beat in a Third Strike match, but with Ken, he literally timed his parries to the time of the super attack that he was getting hit by. It's a really cool video. I might even link it if I could find it. But yeah, yeah. Again, some newcomers might not really like the game that much, or might not be able to get into it that much. But it's still also just a fun game in general. Outside of the technicality, the controls are very smooth. The gameplay is very fast and very fun, and I'm not gonna lie, I like a lot. Unlike Street Fighter 4, I actually had an overall generally positive opinion on the newcomers they brought in. The ones that I personally liked were Makoto, Ibuki, Elena, Yun and Yang, who they brought back in Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition, and Dudley. He's quite a classy gentleman, and yeah, again, I just really like Third Strike's gameplay, and I'm kind of ashamed that I didn't give it the same praise that I'm giving it now. But yeah, another thing I like about Third Strike is, well, the music. I really like the themes. My favorite it probably has to go with my boy Dudley. It's let me just say, when I if I ever get once I get a car, I'm probably gonna be blasting this guy's theme through the aux cord. But anyways, I think I've talked a decent amount about Third Strike. But yeah, it's my second favorite Street Fighter game though, or now on my number one, which I'm just gonna be straight with you, hasn't really changed. And in my opinion, my favorite Street Fighter game is, like I said, the spy has not changed. It is Street Fighter Alpha 3. With a side entry of Hyper Street Fighter Alpha, but mainly Street Fighter Alpha 3. Yep. Street Fighter Alpha 3 is, in my opinion, not only my favorite, but in my opinion, in general, the best Street Fighter Alpha game. Maybe even the best Street Fighter game, but in my opinion, that's kind of up in the air a little bit. But yeah, to put it quite frankly, I love Alpha 3. Anyway, let's talk about the gameplay and the different versions of the game, because, as usual, Street Fighter games don't have a lot of versions. Yeah, basically take what Alpha 2 did well and add not only more content to it, but in my opinion, make it better. And you get Alpha 3. And again, this is kind of in, well, not just kind of in, again, it has that very nice blend of not being overly complex, but not being overly simple. Well, actually just kind of stretch that. It actually lets you to adjust your play style to what you prefer. If you prefer having your gameplay style more simple, well, they have an option for that. If you want a blend of it, they have another option for that too. Well, that's the default option. And if you want your gameplay to be more technical, then you choose the last option. But yeah, again, there's quite a bit of pretty good play styles, not just in the characters, but in just general gameplay. But yeah, another thing I love about this game is the roster. Yeah, you get a fuck ton of characters to choose from, and a lot of really fun ones, in my opinion. I tend to go for the more Hadouken-centered characters, and personally, I really like playing as Balrog. I really like his fighting style. But yeah, this game also introduced another mode in one of my favorite modes in the Street Fighter series, that being Dramatic Battle. Oh boy, do I love me some dramatic battle, and I'm not being sarcastic. I genuinely love this mode. Basically, what you do is you pick a character, and you pretty much put your second character, and if you have a friend along, well, you can have two fighters on the screen. It's basically like two v one matches, to basically put it bluntly. And with friends, this mode is insanely fun. It's kind of a little bit hard to explain, but it's just fun being able to take. It's just fun beating the shit out of an opponent with alongside a friend. And yeah, one thing that is kind of bullshit about this game is the version of M. Bison you have to fight at the end. Yeah, this is one of the most infamous fighting game bosses, and it's very easy to tell why. His Psycho Crusher takes up half the screen and does a butt ton of damage. But yeah, Alpha 3 in general is a great game, but not time to talk about the different versions there are. There's obviously the arcade version, and the version on home consoles pretty much just adds more characters and also adds a World Tournament mode, which I think World Tournament, well, I do like those modes where you get to level up your character, kind of like an RPG, but yeah, there's also the Alpha 3 Upper version, which I think was released in arcades in Japan and is also the GBA version. They add even more characters. They bring back Eagle from Street Fighter 1, Maki from the Final Fight series, and Yun from Street Fighter 3. Unfortunately, Yang isn't there, but hey, get Yun anyway. And Alpha 3 Mans pretty much just adds everything that I love about the series, and in my opinion, is the best version, even if it is on handheld and you prefer just playing games at your house. But yeah, pretty much any version of Alpha 3 will go. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to talk about Hyper Street Fighter Alpha. Pretty much just take, well, pretty much just take the best aspects of the Street Fighter Alpha series in general. It's basically like the Hyper Street Fighter 2 of the Alpha series, but there's a reason why I didn't pick that and it just snubbed Alpha 3. It's because in Hyper Street Fighter Alpha, you're just getting fighting. Yes, you do get a practice mode, but you're just getting fighting. There's no like additional modes in this one, but again, it still is technically the definitive experience for Street Fighter Alpha. But again, I think Alpha 3 is better because not only is there just great gameplay, but you also get fun bonus content. Anyway, I think I talked long enough about Alpha 3, but yeah, it's still my favorite Street Fighter game. Anyway, guys, that was the end of this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and happy May.